Hey everybody, Plushie here, and yeah, because I can't really bring myself to make highly edited spoken videos every day, I decided to hop on sort of a bandwagon of making guides for the brand new Destiny order that came to NA, because this is such a surprise to a lot of people, considering we only got this in JP during the 8th anniversary. So it's super cool that NA is getting this new feature, basically giving you a second GSSR that you can curate your personal all-star roster for. And there are definitely other YouTubers that already made this video, but I got my idea originally from Danny G, who's a super cool Twitch streamer. You should check him out. So yeah, and I'm just going to briefly go over my personal top picks in terms of power level in each of the categories. But honestly, if you're spending $30, you should be choosing whoever you like the most instead of listening to some random YouTuber tell you who to pick. But for the people that are a little bit confused on certain banners, because I've certainly been there, where you don't really know who to pick for a couple of classes, then hope this video helps you a little bit. Before I start, I also want to make this clear that I am making these selections based on the assumption that you're picking these servants for the first time to sort of unlock your servant roster instead of raising the MP levels of your pre-existing servants. And obviously, raising the levels of your pre-existing servants is a lot of times actually better than trying to get new servants at MP1, for DPSs at least. But yeah, to make it more interesting, I'm going to assume that you are unlocking these characters for the first time, and it will heavily benefit characters that perform well even at MP1. So first, let's start with the Saber class, and in terms of the Saber I chose, I picked Miyamoto Musashi. This was certainly a tough decision considering Nero Bride is also really high up there on my list. Nero Bride is a great DPS with a spammable upgraded MP who also doubles as a decent support, and even though she is not nearly as strong compared to some of the modern supports, she is still a decent looping support in certain comps and also has some anti-sky utility. With all that being said, Musashi is perhaps the strongest overall single target Saber even today in JP because of her superior deck with triple buster cards, versatile skill set, and a nuke of an MP. Her most recent skill upgrade on her skill 1 makes her face cards overall very insane because now the double hit effects is actually extended to 3 turns, especially if you're able to shuffle her deck every turn or you are soloing with her, so she can get that really stupid double hit arts card multiple times within 3 turns. The skill also increases her general face card damage as well as her survivability by extending the 30% extra damage on face card effects as well as the damage cut effect. Musashi also has a plethora of utility skills in her kit that helps her deal with annoying boss gimmicks such as Invul Pierce, debuff removal, and buff removal after damage on her MP. The buff removal being after damage on MP is not as bad as some other units since she still has Invul Pierce that allows her to bypass defensive buffs, which is the only type of buffs that suffers from buff removal after damage instead of buff removal before damage. And finally, she is just a nuke of a character with an extremely hard-hitting upgraded Buster MP that also doubles as anti-alter ego / moon cancer coverage, as well as a gorilla deck to maximize the amount of card damage she dishes out, especially against alter egos since she also takes half damage from them. Even at MP1, she is extremely competitive to the numerous MP5 welfare single target sabers we have gotten in the past. As for the archer pick, I have to go with Super Orion. There are many strong DPS units in the SSR archer pool, especially in the AoE category. We have stuff like Gilgamesh, Ishtar, and Tesla, and they all also have upgraded MPs already. However, if there's one singular DPS archer that is least punished by only having MP1, it has to be Super Orion. We all know about Super Orion's insane buster crits very well already, and honestly I never was that big of a fan of the card-based playstyle considering card RNG does heavily affect DPS units that forego a damaging MP for doing more card damage. However, I have slowly come to realize Super Orion's strength is not just his insanely high buster crit damage, but also how he has basically permanent Invul Pierce and debuff immunity as long as he uses his MP every 3 turns. turns, which is relatively easy to do in the right team or even during solos. The permanent debuff immunity in particular has allowed him to become one of the best counters against Cernunos and other heavily debuff based bosses, and having permanent Invul Pierce also means that you can free up your command code slots for something with more utility, as well as your CE slot for something potentially more offensive. A great example is during events with damage CEs, where all of the HPs of the bosses are bloated up, where you cannot really afford to run Invul Pierce CEs over the damage CE. Then someone like Super Orion can be extremely useful. And finally, he is extremely self-sufficient as a crit DPS, having the ability to generate his own stars passively from using his MP, and he also has a bunch of crit steroids both in his skill set and in his MP, and that is of course the Super Orion we are the most familiar with. Combo that with his triple Buster Gorilla deck and you will see him not really losing out on that much damage compared to an actual single target archer that does MP damage. And finally, his MP only scales the attack up part of his MP, not the crit damage buff part, not the star generation part, so even at MP1, his performance can become peak. For the Lancer recommendation, I ended up selecting Melusine. Since I'm mainly a JP player, I was initially very inclined to pick Skahak, as her most recent buff propelled her to become arguably one of the strongest single target Lancers in the game. However, it is still a change that is 2 years away, and for instant gratification's sakes, I would have to go with the 2-in-1 servant Melusine. Melusine's strength is well known to the majority of the player base, and she's probably touted as the strongest Buster loop farmer right now, as she has the ability to run Black Grill in a double Koyanskaya plug Oberon comp. I will admit her farming utility is a lot more difficult to shine in 90++ at a mere MP1 due to her lack of an MP upgrade, but her value as a servant is still often higher than most, considering she is very solid in both her single target and AoE forms. Single target Melusine is an arts crit MP spammer that truly lives up to the knight that she took her name from, Lancelot. Basically imagine Saber Lancelot but on steroids. Her MP gives her a stackable 3-turn MP gain boost, making her spam her MP easier the more she spams, essentially creating a positive feedback loop. Eventually she will enter a state where she gets her MP back for free each turn just from the refund and from the massive amounts of MP gain boost alone. Reminder that this also affects defensive MP gain, so taking hits gives her a lot of MP as well. Despite her inability to use her skill 3 in her single target form, her first 2 skills are wonderful for providing her with the stars she wants to crit with, helping her absorb those stars pretty much guaranteed, and giving her a sizable attack up steroid, allowing her to play absolutely without issue down a skill. Buster AoE Melusine is a lot more well known due to her reputation in Buster looping. She's basically an AoE nuke that essentially has a built-in K-scope with her full charge on transformation effect, and she ramps up her Buster steroids whenever she MPs, boosting all of her future MPs as well as her Buster card damage. Her MP has the added effect of granting her Invul Pierce for the turn, allowing her to bypass annoying boss gimmicks. Melusine is undoubtedly one of the strongest AoE Lancers in the game, and her single target form doubles as one of the most spammy art single target DPS units. In terms of my personal recommendation for the Rider slot, Rhinus is going to be my answer. This is probably the easiest choice on my list, considering how much I love reminding people how underrated Rhinus is. Rhinus is arguably one of the strongest supports in the game right now that isn't a meta support. Basically, what I mean by that is the 2 Scotties, Koyan Light, Castoria, and Oberon, even though that's mostly for farming. Ever since her MP upgrade, she has been one of Castoria's best partners due to her ability to give the entire party overcharge with her MP, as well as insane amounts of MP gain boosts. The MP gain boost in particular becomes extremely broken once she starts spamming her MP, and of course spamming her MP also helps her spam her future MPs even easier. This is kind of like the thing that I talked about with Melusine, where the more you spam, and it creates like a positive feedback loop, but instead of just applying it to herself, it applies to the entire party. The MP gain allows even non-crit arts card to gain massive amounts of MP gauge, and it also boosts the entire party's MP gain from taking enemy hits as well. Rhinus is also a unit that can keep your party extremely safe outside of providing extra solemn defense stacks with her MP for Castoria. She also has a party-wide defense up, targetable 3x3 turn invul in case one of your targets gets focus fired and their solemn defense stacks gets worn down a bit too quickly, AoE crit rate down on MP, similar to Summer Ibuki I mentioned in yesterday's video, where she can essentially prevent your entire party from getting crit at all, a targetable massive debuff resist up, and even eliminate defensive disadvantages. This makes her particularly strong when paired up with a Berserker Servant in CQs, as that is basically the only weakness Berserkers have. Finally, Rhinus also provides a decent amount of offensive buffs, mainly from the 40% attack up on her skill, as well as the AoE defense down on her MP, which scales with MP level, as well as an interesting battery spread of 20-20-10, making her occasionally a great choice as a tertiary farming support. One negative that people bring up against Rhinus is that she's a rider and she will steal your stars, but honestly, especially with modern DPS units, usually you are either running a full-on arts team that doesn't generate stars anyways, or you're running a team with a servant that has very self-sufficient star generation as well as star absorb up, which can ignore basically riders' inherently higher star absorb. So I have never really run into this problem at all whenever using Rhinus. For the caster slot, it is at the same time the most complicated one for me, but also the simplest one for me if you're missing any of these big three casters. I of course mean Castoria, Skadi, and Merlin. And if you are missing multiple of them, the recommendation sequence goes like this: Castoria, much greater than Skadi, greater than Merlin. However, these are also among some of the most rolled units in the game, and many even light to medium spenders already have all three of them, even some free-to-plays. A personal pick for me outside of these three options would be Miss Crane, as she enables a lot of silly stuff that makes the game extremely cool, such as infinite buff stacking, max damage challenges, and min turns. And Crane honestly still is an extremely useful utility support outside of these fancy shenanigans, even if you're not interested in them. She has a bunch of great generic effects in her kit, such as a skill that targets a single unit and gives them star absorption boost, as well as 50% crit up, making her a great crit support. And she can also give one of your units MP damage up and attack up whenever she MPs, which is quite repeatable considering she has a 100 MP battery, and granted, you use a plug suit to bring her back after she leaves the field. She also gives star generation up and even technically a team-wide invul, even though she doesn't shield herself with that skill. If you combo that skill on the same turn she uses her MP, she is off the field anyways, and there's only 2 units on your field, so it's essentially a team-wide invul. She also has an interesting niche effect of making your party insta-kill immune, but it's really niche. Overall, she is a very interesting servant that initially seemed questionable to dump your Saint Courts on, especially considering after her there are a bunch of powerhouse units such as Castoria and other Lost Belt 6 units, but right now if you do have the choice to try to grab a copy, I definitely recommend nabbing a copy just because of how unique she is and how generically good she actually is, and of course all of the fancy shenanigans she can enable, making your game a lot cooler, especially if you like building wacky teams and having really insane combos. For my personal pick for the assassin slot, of course, I have to pick Coin Sky of Light, but the most obvious answer for classes that contain meta supports are always going to be the meta supports themselves, so I also wanted to add an additional recommendation in case you already rolled for said meta support. And in that case, my pick has to go towards Kama, as in my opinion, she is still the best single target assassin in the game. Yes, King Hassan has gotten many buffs and drives a hard bargain, but Kama just fits so well in all kinds of scenarios. Her 50 MP battery allows her to be slotted in for multi-core farming, and overall triple Skadi Kama is just such a convenient team to kill bosses with. Her charm locking comboed with her infinite duration guts and her skill 1 heal makes her still the superior soloer in the assassin class compared to King Hassan. and her skill 3 class transformation, giving her a 3-turn class advantage against alter egos, makes her arguably still the best alter ego counter boss killer in the entire game, partially due to SSR Pretensions not really having a single dedicated DPS. You simply cannot go wrong with Kama if you want a strong single target assassin that also doubles as an alter ego killer. Berserker is another class that has many strong contenders for the pick. I ended up landing on 2 units that I feel like even at lower MP levels can excel. Morgan is an extremely powerful Berserker that often gets over criticized for her not amazing buster looping damage. However, she's an extremely competent all-around unit that can function well virtually anywhere. She has great synergy with Castoria, not just because of her ability to give overcharge to the entire party whenever she MPs, but also the fact that she has Castoria's skill 2 as her own skill 2 as well, boosting the entire party's MP gain even further. I often find myself enjoy pairing Morgan with Castoria in CQs even outside of solemn defense spam teams just to have her gain her entire MP bar back with a single arts crit. Morgan also bolstered the party's survivability by constantly casting attack down and crit rate down with her skill 3 at the end of each turn, and she also has very reliable crits because of her skill 3 giving her a 5000% star absorption boost despite her being a Berserker. And unlike a lot of the other Buster units, she actually has universal star weight up on herself instead of just Buster star weight up, greatly bolstering her MP gain potential because now she also has really consistent crits on her arts and quick cards. Morgan is a unit that can dominate in farming at higher MP levels, but also still dominate outside of farming regardless of MP levels due to how versatile and complete her skill set is. Musashi Summer is quite the complete opposite. She basically is focused solely on spamming her MP, and her skill set isn't anything too crazy, even though the double hit on her arts card still allows her to gain insane amounts of MP just from a single arts card, even without crits. Her MP level is a major part of her power level compared to Morgan. However, because of her MP upgrade, her MP damage is still very solid at MP 1 and is the only AoE arts unit that can consistently outdamage Summer Ibuki by a significant margin in JP even to this day. Obviously, choosing Summer Musashi means that you want to skip Summer Ibuki, and you might want to level up her MP level in the future if you have the chance, and you must wait over a year for her buff, so she definitely is more of a long con planning unit rather than instant gratification unit. You can go 2 ways regarding choosing someone from the extra 1 pool. You can either go for a DPS or a support. In terms of DPS, I think despite the power level of other strong DPSs present in the pool, such as Karen, Tyra, or even the 2 AoE Avenger Arts Loopers, I personally would go for the all-reliable Jolter, especially if we consider only MP 1. Jolter's skill 1 is still one of the strongest crit skills in the game today, with massive star absorption boost for 3 turns as well as a 3-turn 50% crit up only on a 5-turn cooldown as well. Her third skill is a great tool for blocking enemy MPs with the invul, but also acts as a huge buster damage boost on top with the mana burst effect, and after its most recent upgrade, it even charges her MP by a whopping 50%, removing her old issue of having trouble immediately popping her MP on round start. Regarding the negative of tying offensive buffs to hard survival, very often you are breaking bars when you pop your 1-turn burst skills, and break skills in modern day are very often devastating offensive effects or even just straight up fully charges the enemy's MP, so you will be tanking an MP very often anyways, and you'd be surprised the amount of times you would use your hard survival skills alongside your mana burst effect together even if you were given the choice not to. Speaking of nasty break bar effects, her MP buff block is also an amazing tool to play around certain break bar effects. Setting an essentially preemptive buff removal whenever you get to MP is a very powerful effect as well. The MP also generates 30 stars, which is often a lot more than most single target quicks naturally generate from their MP, making her very self-sufficient in the crit playstyle when you combo this with her first skill. And finally, have I mentioned the MP itself is still one of the hardest hitting MPs in the game because it is upgraded, even at MP1 if we don't consider any particular anti-trade. A Jolter MP Buster Brave Chain is still one of the most devastating burst damage combos in the game. If you really don't want to pick a DPS, you can also of course pick Himiko or Holmes. They both function okay at just MP1. Himiko is a decent enough buster support that can also fit into solemn spam teams because her MP gives the entire party 2 stages of overcharge. Even though I do find her performance outside of solemn spam teams at lower MP levels a little bit lackluster because the 2-stage overcharge boost is just not that broken of an effect outside of when you combo her with Castoria or maybe in the future with someone like Tonalico. She also is recently outclassed as a value-based buster support, at least in my opinion, by the newly buffed Constantine in JP because I think his skill set is a lot more, supportive, as well as his MP actually protecting your team a lot better than Himiko's overcharge boost, unless you consider Castoria. Holmes is still the only unit in the game that can give someone else ignore defense. He also can give you Invul Pierce and a hefty crit up while he does it, and the 50% battery buff certainly helps him activate his MP. However, there are many CEs that exist to mitigate these issues, such as Invul Pierce CEs and ignore defense CEs, and now even with command codes you can ignore defense and pierce Invul with your face card, without having to dedicate a support slot to someone like Holmes. And Holmes' performance as a crit DPS definitely leaves a lot to be desired, so Holmes never feels truly required despite his uniqueness. Extra 2 is another pool that is actually stock full of decent supports. Obviously, if you don't have Oberon, you should always go for Oberon, but assuming you did roll for him like the little meta chaser you are, I have 2 more great suggestions for you. Dolman is certainly the more used one out of the 2. The amount of times I actually got away with farming using a double Dolman comp in JP is quite staggering. Dolman is the strongest insta-kill user in the game and can easily abuse that against low rarity enemies that appears quite often on Bleach Earth quests as well as certain hunting quests and free quests. He has an 80 MP battery, allowing him to use his MP immediately without any external help if you have his Append 2 skill maxed out. There are also Dolman farming comps that does rely on card RNG instead of insta-kill, and very often you will be getting those cards as those teams usually contain 2 Dolmans and another Chaotic Evil unit, making the entire team get massive amounts of attack ups as well as crit ups. Dolman is one of the most convenient farmers and his value only increases as more weird JP farming nodes pop up, and the best part is usually his farming comps either rely on his insta-kill or crit damage, neither of which is affected by his MP level, so MP1 Dolman is absolutely fine. Dolman can of course also just serve as a strong Chaotic Evil buffer for non-farming content. 40% attack up, 100% crit up, and 30% defense down all for 3 turns put into a singular unit is no joke, and if you consider his Bond CE, that's another 30% MP damage up. And the fact that it's a party-wide effect makes himself already a super powerful DPS, even if we don't consider other teammates. This also once again makes stacking double Dolman make a lot of sense, just like in farming. We have the second unit I like to mention, Van Gogh. For challenging content, Van Gogh is certainly the more powerful one of the 2. Even when not considering foreigners, Van Gogh still is able to buff the party's critical damage by 50% to 100% depending on her MP level. And she also can give consistent star gen because her MP also gives a 3-turn star per turn effect. She also has targetable star absorb up to give one of your DPS's consistent crits, as well as multiple attack ups, and can even protect the team by using her team-wide evade as well as spam terror to stop the enemies from moving. When you consider foreigners, that 50% to 100% crit up is bumped up all the way to 150% crit up at MP1 and 200% crit up at MP5 just from a single MP, which is absolutely ridiculous and allows your main DPS foreigner to very often hit critical damage cap even if you only have Van Gogh at MP1, considering how spammable her MP is, because she also has a battery that scales depending on how many curse stacks she has on herself, and one of her skill effects also absorbs all curse stacks on the field, including on the enemies, so she can very often get this battery to actually charge her by 100%. These buffs are so strong that it often works well enough just on Van Gogh herself because she is also a foreigner. Kinda similar to Dolman, this also makes stacking double Van Gogh viable. Van Gogh is also just a really good solo servant because she has the ability to terror spam the enemy and not take hits every turn. And also, it makes double Van Gogh a real devastating combo that is more than just a gimmick. However, Van Gogh's presence in farming is not very big and only appears sparingly in some crit-based face card compositions. Therefore, I still recommend Dolman over Van Gogh if you care more about farming. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I kind of just whipped up the script throughout the day and also recorded it and now edited it, so it still took a while, but it definitely is not as well thought out as my other long form videos. Once again, thanks Danny G for the idea. Please make sure to check out his Twitch streams, they are very entertaining. And also, if you want more information on the individual servants I brought up in this video, I either have hot take videos on them, which I will link in the description, or you can check out FGO Wiki for their details. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed and feel free to ask any questions in the comments.